So while we are waiting for Stats SA to confirm the true picture when it comes to unemployment in South Africa, the predictions are dire. Remember that South Africa already has one of the highest unemployment rates in the world. We're looking at those figures above 30%. And if you include people who've simply given up looking for work, it's heading to 40%. And that was before COVID-19 and the resultant lockdown. Adrian Saville now is the CEO of Cannon Asset Managers. He's also a professor of economics, finance and strategy at Gibs. He joins us now via Zoom. Prof, thank you very much. So you've called South Africa's unemployment rates harrowing and tragic before. Now we have COVID-19. Let's just start with how bad you think it could get in the second quarter.
Francis, the numbers, I think, really are anyone's guess. We've got a wide range that sits between possibly 1 million jobs lost in the formal sector and as many as 5 million work opportunities lost economy-wide, in other words, including the informal sector. And on that second number, I'm referring to sources including the likes of Ruth Hall of PLAS. Whether we take the very narrow definition or the strict definition, I think it's fair to argue that South Africa came into COVID-19 in a state of social and economic crisis. And that unemployment number has to be one of the pieces of evidence. And what COVID-19 has done is it's really just driven us deeper into crisis rather than taking us into crisis. I think that really is sort of fiddly. And it takes us quite possibly to an unemployment number in the mid-40s or even 50%.
And what does that mean for an economy? Try and articulate it, or actually for a society to have real unemployment heading to 50% or so?
It is stressful at a range of levels, and we can think of the macroeconomic impacts, including the difficulty of being able to meet tax revenue collection targets, the inability to create jobs in a shrinking economy to reverse out the effect of the unemployment. Because when you're sitting with that 40 or 50% unemployment number, investor confidence along with consumer confidence are going to be missing in action. And those are critical ingredients to restarting or reigniting and reversing out the unemployment figure. So the crisis really translates into us being stuck. And that then ushers in this critical conversation about structural reform. And of course, we can talk about the microeconomic implications. And this is the devastation at the level of families and households. And numbers and evidence is already starting to present on that go right across the economy, including some very harrowing numbers on people going to bed hungry.
Yeah, starvation, a real issue. And people are thinking, how do we get unstuck after this? I was interested, you've been writing recently about having a side hustle, even if you have a job, looking for something else. People are looking for creative ways, maybe new jobs could be created in the future. But I mean, with this shrinking economy, the shrinking everywhere, do you have customers if you try and start up new businesses? I guess, is there hope?
As horrifying as crisis is, the evidence from countries around the world, and we can be as wide-ranging or wide-reaching as going to examples from Latin America, Chile, under military rule in the 1970s, goes on to become a prosperous middle-income country. South Korea goes through IMF bailout in the late 1990s in the Asian crisis and goes on to build Samsung, Hyundai, and Kia. And we can learn from these cases. We can take evidence and experiences from those cases. We don't have to invent the wheel. And that's one of the pieces of confidence or courage that I take from Tito Mbowene's 77-pager, is that it is evidence-led, that this isn't an attempt to invent policy for the first time, but rather we can borrow from the experiences and evidence of others and bring it to South Africa's case. The key point is that this isn't a time for talking or suggesting or pointing. We are in crisis and we have to get on with the structural reforms.
Yeah. Well, let's end there. You used to talk about the six-pack, things that made countries strong, but things like savings, we're not very good there. Looking at education, South Africa suffering. So we were flabby already. What desperately needs to be done? Just paint the macro picture for us and what you think is really urgent.
No, so if I work on that six-factor research, which points to 6 key ingredients, and that's evidence that we've been building in a research study that's been running for the last 15 years through the Gordon Institute. And it points to a range of factors, as you highlight, all the way from healthcare. And what I guess one of the notable features is that it was only recently that healthcare suddenly became a talking point. It's been sitting in our research for more than a decade. But there are some silver linings, even if modest, in the South African scenario. And the one is our very vibrant neighborhood, and that South Africa remains one of the more competitive economies in the region. So that's a lever that's available for pulling. There are also, economics is a win-win discipline, and it's where you have the capacity or latitude for something called a free lunch. And one of the freest lunches available to South Africa is the ability to lift savings and investment through policy certainty. And by a clear policy voice and clear policy directive, there is the latitude to rebuild investor confidence in the economy. And then it's quickly the case that South Africa has established investment channels, a sophisticated, deep capital markets, which would quickly translate into gross domestic fixed investment with all of its spillovers and multipliers and linkages. So I don't think it's a place to be naive or doe-eyed, pointing to. The reality is we have to get out of the business of talking and suggesting and into the business of doing. And the doing is about the policy certainty and then bringing along those components. Arguably most critical of those components is gross domestic fixed investment.
And then let's really finally end on investment. From your perspective, how are outside investors viewing South Africa? Concern even about the alcohol ban, the talk of companies after that and how investors will see us. But then you see sometimes, despite the stress of businesses, the market's flying. What's happening?
Well, you've seen the Johannesburg Stock Exchange is really made up of a two-legged animal. And on the one hand, you've got the global-facing businesses, which have enjoyed a far more buoyant environment. They've benefited from rand weakness. Those global-facing businesses include, most recently, of course, the gold miners, the gold producers, who are enjoying a very buoyant environment, complemented or amplified by the weak rand. But the other leg of the animal is the very weak and anemic domestic economy. And it's hard to find an investment case in this environment. I think you have to place an emphasis on the quality of companies looking for balance sheet strength, management agility, the ability of management to reposition, the overused word is pivot, and then never in this environment to confuse accounting earnings with cash flow.
All right. We have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time tonight. Adrian Saville, CEO of Cannon Asset Managers. And we'll continue with this focus on jobs, what can be done. He spoke about some silver linings, but it really depends on policy, on the rhetoric of leaders as well.